More casualties in Afghanistan with no sign of an end. We ask, is this war going anywhere? This week, how many of us imagined that when troops were sent to Afghanistan in an effort to defeat the Taliban, that 8 years later there'd be no prospect of stability in the troubled state? With soldiers who fought there, diplomats who live there, Afghans and opponents of the war, we ask what has been achieved and what does the future hold? Hello, the British Prime Minister Gordon Brown was this week pretty adamant that British soldiers had the equipment they need to accomplish their mission. I am confident that we are right to be in Afghanistan, he said, that we have the strongest possible plan and we have the resources needed to do the job. What exactly is that job and can it be done, especially amid fierce criticism of government policy from political opponents? In a moment, my colleague Jeremy Paxman debates the issues, but first our diplomatic editor Mark Urban, in the first of two reports, analyses the aims of the mission.
Civvies, women and children!
British troops are fighting through the most densely populated part of Helmand. Every compound or field offers opportunities for ambush.
Stay in a safe line.
Senior officers have said the immediate imperative for the operation is to secure these communities for the forthcoming Afghan elections.
If you're going to try and deliver security for the elections, you're going to have to put troops in and you're going to have to clear out the Taliban, the insurgents from that area. Otherwise people won't feel confident about going into polling stations and voting. The problem you've got is that if you're going into a population area, because that's where the votes are, that brings with it difficult country.
Looking a little further into the future, another election assumes critical importance in what's going on. That's the American midterm congressional election due in November next year. The White House and Pentagon have made clear to their new commander in Afghanistan, General Stan McChrystal, that they expect to see positive results in time for that electoral battle.
I can't tell you what Washington has set McChrystal, but if they've set him a year, that is ludicrous. I do hear from Washington that they want this thing turned around by the midterms. The best you can do inside a year is probably begin in a slow fashion to reverse the dynamic. Success is a long way ahead of that, and unless you are prepared to think more long-term than a year, you're not going to achieve success in this.
And if things are going better by next November, what then? The American emphasis is on boosting Afghan troop and police numbers as quickly as possible. It's vital that security operations have an Afghan face.
Substantial progress has been made in some parts of Afghanistan already, in the north of the country in particular, where there's much less of an insurgent threat, and in Kabul indeed. An awful lot more has to be done. I think in 3, 4, 5 years, a significant amount can be done in terms of building Afghan security capacity. What you can't do is hand over security in the south of Afghanistan to the Afghan National Army in 1 or 2 years. That's simply not feasible.
Downing Street insists that what they're doing in Afghanistan and Pakistan is essential for maintaining Britain's security. It's a similar line to that used by the Obama administration, only with the key difference that in the UK there is a large Pakistani diaspora which is very sensitive to the idea that British forces might be killing their fellow Muslims. So with all the potential for blowback, it's a trickier area. Nevertheless, people in government are sure that combating terrorism in Afghanistan and Pakistan is the right approach.
8 years ago, after September the 11th, 2001, the case for intervention in Afghanistan was clear. It was to remove the Taliban regime and deprive Al-Qaeda of a safe base for terrorist plots that were a threat to countries around the world. In 2009, the case for our continued involvement is the same: to prevent terrorist attacks here in Britain and across the world by dealing with the terrorist threat at its source, that crucible of terror on the border and mountain areas of Afghanistan and Pakistan.
The view in NATO or Whitehall is that the current fighting will continue at this rate of intensity for weeks or even months to come. The government has put forward ideas about why Afghanistan matters, but many confess they're still unsure that they can succeed because of the huge task required in delivering Afghan governance or Afghan security and the limited time in which to do it.
Well, with us now in the studio is Brigadier Ed Butler, a former commander of British forces in Helmand until 2006. In Washington is Ali Jalali, former Afghan Interior Minister under President Karzai. We're also joined by Lindsay German from the Stop the War Coalition and by the former infantry officer and Tory MP Adam Holloway. Thank you all for being here. How, first off, do we judge that the sacrifice of these young people will have been worthwhile, Brigadier?
When we've made Afghanistan a better place.
And what is a better place?
Well, that's what we're struggling with at the moment. From the original objectives, we went in there in 2001, were very clear. 2002, they were still very clear, and I was there. I think the challenge now is quite how those objectives need to be realigned with the situation.
You mean to say we've no idea what we're fighting for?
No, the military know what we're doing.
Well, you're obeying orders, aren't you?
We're obeying orders, but in essence, what we've always done, in my experience, is we bought time and space for other government actions to take place.
How does it seem to you, when will we know these sacrifices have been worthwhile?
I think we have to see that we're really fighting two wars here. We're fighting a war against the Taliban, and we're fighting a war to win the people. And what we have to try to do, I think, is try to separate the people from the Taliban. And so far, we've been very focused on war fighting the Taliban and not sufficiently focused on winning over the people.
Lindsay German, do you think there will ever be justified, these sacrifices?
Well, I don't think so, because I think what's happened is we now have double the number of Afghan civilian casualties. We now have a higher number of British soldiers killed than in Iraq, and nobody seems to know what the war is for. When we went in 8 years ago, we did defeat the Taliban. They've now come back. The war has spread to Pakistan. We haven't made Britain a safer place, and the people who are really suffering are, of course, the people who are dying on the ground, both British and other NATO forces and the Afghan people themselves.
Mr. Jalali, that is an increasingly commonly heard view throughout the West. Can you explain to us why Western young people should lay their lives on the line for the sake of your country?
We have missed many opportunities in the past. Sure. If we had paid attention to Afghanistan 2002-2004, there would be no major casualties today in Helmand province. And now, today again, if we again convince ourselves that this is not worth it, we will see more difficult times in the future.
We're told that the troops have got to be there in order that elections can take place this summer. How do we judge these elections have meant anything at all?
It's an incremental progression. I mean, if you look at what was there before, which was nothing, we are very, very slowly taking it forward. How long that's going to be and how much of that commitment is going to cost, then that's a different matter. But my experience from there is that we have got to reaffirm what success actually looks like. We were very unrealistic in 2005 and 2006 of what we're going to achieve. We've learnt some very, very hard lessons, invested a lot of blood and treasure to where we are now. And I think this is a really key tipping point, that we know what we're up against, we know what the scale of a problem is, we've got to readjust and then go forward from here.
But we are defending one of the most corrupt governments in the world. In the index of corrupt governments, it's in the top 10. I don't think there's any dispute about this. And what are we doing there? We say it's to protect the government, we say it's to do this. We're actually making it much more dangerous. And when people talk about more troops going in or more equipment needed, I think this is a disservice.
So what do you say, walk away from it all?
No, I'm not saying walk away from it all. I'm saying there has to be a political solution, and there cannot be a military solution.
And until there's a political solution, you keep troops there, do you?
What everybody admits to is that what Afghanistan, as one of the poorest countries
in the world,
these
things always end in a political solution.
Schools and hospitals and those kind of things. That is not what we are doing, and we're not winning the hearts and minds of the Afghans.
We'll talk about some of this in a little more detail in a moment or two, but as British casualties in Afghanistan have risen, the country has now lost 184 young people, a total greater than the number killed in Iraq. Increasing questions are being asked about what they're being expected to risk their lives precisely to do. Mark Urban looks now at the tactics.
Helmand is a bleak, dangerous place.